The coffee shop wasn't special. Beige walls, a hum that never stopped, the same song looping too often. I came here because it was halfway between work and home, a safe middle. I'd sit by the window, laptop open, pretending to work while watching people come and go. That morning, she came in again. Elena. She wasn't one of those people who tried to draw attention. She just carried herself like someone who didn't need to. A cream-colored coat, hair loosely tied, sleeves slightly rolled. She ordered the same thing every time, black coffee, 1 sugar, and always paused before saying her name to the barista, as if the moment itself cost something. I noticed the pause before I noticed her. She worked in the same building as me, 3 floors above. We'd spoken only twice before, once over an email about a client proposal, once in the elevator when she smiled at my awkward silence. "Quiet floors are underrated," she'd said. I'd laughed, too late to make it sound natural. Now, 2 weeks later, she was here again, sitting across the room, papers spread neatly beside her mug. I told myself not to look, but every time I scrolled down my screen, my eyes found their way back. When the barista called my name, I stood too fast, bumping my chair. She looked up. Our eyes met, just long enough to make me forget the point of standing. "You again," she said when I passed her table, like it was a small coincidence. "Guess I'm predictable," I said, trying for casual. Her mouth curved, not a full smile, something quieter, private. "Consistency's underrated too." I laughed softly, folded my napkin just to keep my hands busy. I told myself it was just small talk, but something about the way she said "you again" stayed in the air between us, like a thread I didn't know how to cut. She went back to her papers. I sat back down. For a while, all I did was watch the light on her hands, how she traced the edge of a page with her fingertip before turning it, how she lifted her cup, pausing before each sip like she was waiting for something she didn't expect to come. At some point, my laptop went to sleep, and I just let it. When she got up to leave, she passed my table again. "We have the client meeting tomorrow," she said, her voice softer now. "You'll be there?" "Yeah. I'm supposed to take notes." "Good." A faint smile. "You notice details." Before I could reply, she was gone, the scent of her coffee lingering, her words heavier than they should have been. I stared at my phone, at the unsent text I'd written to no one in particular last night. "Don't you ever get tired of silence?" I deleted it. Typed again. "Looking forward to tomorrow." Then stopped. Deleted that too. The next morning came too quickly. I caught myself checking the mirror before heading out, something I hadn't done for work in months. At the meeting, she sat across from me, all business, sharp tone, precise notes, the kind of control that leaves no space for accident. But when the client left, she stayed behind, gathering papers slower than necessary. "Good work," she said without looking up. "Thanks," I managed. A pause. The kind that isn't empty. She finally met my eyes. "This stays professional," she said. "Just business." I nodded, but my heart was too loud for such simple words. "Of course," I said. She gave a small, careful smile, the kind people give when they already don't believe what they've just said. And when she walked away, I realized I wasn't sure whether she meant it, or wanted me not to. She called it a follow-up meeting. "Just another client debrief," she said. But when I stepped into her office, the client folder was already closed. The light from the tall windows softened the edges of everything, her desk, her expression, even the silence between us. "Coffee?" she asked. "Or tea?" "Tea's fine." She poured it carefully, like it mattered. Her hands didn't shake, but there was a pause, the kind that betrays thought. "You always look like you're about to apologize for something," she said suddenly, handing me the cup. I blinked. "Maybe I am." "For what?" I tried to smile. "Existing too close to your schedule." That got a quiet laugh out of her, low and genuine. It lingered longer than it should have. We sat across from each other, the air filled with the faint scent of jasmine. Papers on her desk lay untouched. She leaned back, looking at the ceiling as if the conversation wasn't real, or maybe too real. You remind me of someone, she said after a moment. When I was your age. I didn't ask who. The way she said it told me enough. Whoever it was, they mattered. Instead, I said, that sounds like a compliment. Maybe. Or a warning. She glanced at me then, eyes steady but soft, like she'd already decided something she didn't want to. The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was heavier than that, quiet but aware, like standing too close to an open flame. Later that week, we were the last ones left in the office. A thunderstorm had rolled in, the kind that makes the city lights flicker and the hallways hum with static. She was closing her laptop when I asked, You need a ride? I'll wait it out, she said, looking toward the rain. It's not my first storm. Still, she didn't tell me to leave. So I didn't. We stood by the window, watching the rain blur everything outside. She crossed her arms, not to shield herself, but to hold still. You ever feel like you missed something? I asked quietly. Not a big thing, just something small. But you can't stop thinking about it. Her gaze didn't move from the glass. All the time. I waited for her to say more. She didn't. But her hand rested on the edge of the desk, close enough that I could see the faint tremor in her fingers, a small, human detail that made her seem suddenly fragile, suddenly real. When the thunder cracked, she flinched slightly, and I, without thinking, reached to steady her, just a touch at her wrist. She didn't pull away. A second passed. Maybe two. Then she said softly, You shouldn't. I know. But neither of us moved. Her eyes met mine, steady again, no smile this time, just the truth either of us wanted to name. When I finally stepped back, she exhaled, a sound half like relief, half like loss. Tomorrow, she said, almost to herself. We'll both pretend this didn't happen. Okay. But as I left her office, I caught my reflection in the glass, and I could still feel the warmth of her wrist against my palm. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me, not out of anger, more like both of us were afraid of what would happen if we did. But the silence had its own weight. Her office door, usually half open, stayed shut. My desk felt smaller, the air tighter. Every email from her came short, formal, stripped of anything human. And still, every time her name appeared in my inbox, my chest tightened. By Thursday, the excuse appeared, a minor project she said needed review. Stop by after lunch, the message read. Simple. Professional. Too careful. I waited longer than I needed to before knocking. Come in, she said without looking up. She was different that day, hair tied higher, sleeves rolled to her elbows, the kind of posture people use when they're trying not to feel something. Sorry if I'm interrupting, you're not, she said too quickly. I stepped in, and the quiet felt like a warning. The papers on her desk were untouched again. The tea had gone cold. She handed me a folder, fingers brushing mine for half a second. Neither of us acknowledged it. I made a few notes, she said. You'll see I've. Her voice caught barely, before continuing. Simplified some of your drafts. Right, I murmured. That makes sense. I didn't look at the folder. I looked at her. She noticed, and looked away. We stayed that way, suspended between work and something else, until someone knocked. Hey, Elena? It was Thomas, her colleague from marketing, older, familiar with her in the way people are when they've known someone for years. She straightened, tone shifting instantly. Yes? He leaned in, glanced at me, then back to her. We're grabbing drinks later. You coming? I have a few things to finish, she said. Rain check. He smiled faintly, then left. But something in her expression tightened. She didn't look at me again for a long time. I wanted to say something, anything, to break whatever invisible line had just been redrawn between us. Instead, I said, He seems close to you. Her eyes lifted, sharp but unreadable. Thomas? He's a friend. Don't start reading into things. I wasn't. You were, she said softer now. You do that. We both laughed then, just to let the air move again. She turned toward the window, arms folded. This can't happen, she whispered, not looking at me. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. She shook her head before I could speak. You're too young. I'm too. She stopped herself. It's complicated. Then why do you keep looking at me like that? The words left me before I could stop them. Her breath caught. A long silence. The kind that hums with everything unsaid. She turned, eyes searching mine. Don't, she said. But she didn't move. Neither did I. For a heartbeat, the room disappeared, just her eyes, her breath, the faint scent of rain through the half-open window. Her hand twitched, barely, as if reaching for me, then stopping. When she finally stepped back, her voice trembled, almost invisible. You should go. I nodded but didn't move. And for a moment, one unbearable second, it felt like if either of us breathed wrong, the whole thing would break open. We left the office together that night by accident. Or that's what we told ourselves. The others had gone home early, and the elevator ride down was too quiet, just the hum of fluorescent light and the faint smell of her perfume. Outside, the city was softer than usual, washed in the gold of streetlights. We walked without talking, both heading in the same direction though either of us had said so. She carried her bag over one shoulder, her coat open despite the chill. I wanted to offer her my jacket, but even that felt too much, too intimate for what we were pretending to be. When we reached the park, she slowed. Let's sit a minute, she said. There was a bench near the path, half lit by a flickering lamp. She brushed off the seat before sitting, a small, pointless gesture that said more than her words. I sat beside her, careful to leave a few inches of air between us. For a while, the only sound was the wind in the trees. Then she said quietly, You've been avoiding me. I thought you wanted that. Her lips pressed together, not quite a frown, not quite a smile. Maybe I did. But that doesn't mean it feels right. I watched her profile, the way her hair moved with the breeze, the crease near her mouth when she held something back. You ever think about stopping? I asked. She turned to me. Stopping what? This, I said. Whatever it is we're doing. A soft laugh. We're not doing anything. Then why does it feel like we are? Her breath caught, barely audible. She looked away, toward the empty street. Because you look at me like you want to mean something to me. I swallowed. And you look at me like you already do. That made her flinch. Just slightly, but enough. She folded her hands together, thumbs brushing, a restless habit I'd never noticed before. You shouldn't say things like that, she whispered. Then tell me to stop. Her voice trembled. You think it's that simple? I didn't answer. I couldn't. A long pause stretched between us, thick with everything we hadn't said. Then, softer, she added, You don't know what I've already lost. The words felt like a crack in the surface, the kind of truth that slips out only when someone's tired of holding it in. I waited. She didn't explain. I wanted to ask what she meant, but something in her face, a mix of guilt and longing, told me she wouldn't answer. Instead, I said quietly, You're not the only one afraid of this. Her eyes met mine then, steady, searching. We stayed like that, a few inches apart, breathing the same cold air. I could see the question forming in her gaze, the one neither of us could ask out loud. What happens if we stop pretending? But before she said it, before I could even reach for her hand, she stood. We should go, she said softly, almost apologetically. Before one of us says something we can't take back. She started walking. I didn't follow right away. Because in that still, hollow space where her warmth had been, I already knew I'd crossed the line the moment I didn't want her to leave. The next week, she wasn't there. No morning coffee. No quiet footsteps in the hallway. No familiar hum of her voice behind the office glass. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. People take time off. Deadlines shift. But by the third day, her absence felt deliberate, a silence that didn't just exist, but pressed against me. When she finally returned, she looked different. Not worse. Just sealed off, like someone who'd closed the door from the inside. "Everything okay?" I asked carefully. She smiled, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "Fine. Just needed a few days." But something in the way she said days made me feel like it had been longer. Her tone was brisk, her posture sharper. She spoke to me the way she did to everyone else. No pauses, no softness, no lingering glances that gave too much away. By the end of the day, I'd convinced myself I'd imagined it all. Until I saw the photo. It was on her desk, a small frame turned halfway toward the wall. A boy, maybe 10, grinning with that unguarded light kids still have before they learn to hide it. Same eyes as hers. I didn't mean to stare, but she noticed. "That's my son," she said quietly, without looking up from her papers. "He lives with his father during the school year." I nodded, words caught somewhere between my throat and my chest. She sighed then, setting her pen down. "This is why," she said. "Why it can't happen. Why I can't let it." "Let what?" I asked, though we both knew. She looked at me then, really looked, the kind of look that hurts more than any confession. "You think this is just about us?" Her voice trembled on us. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The conversation ended there, but the silence after it lasted the whole week. I stopped coming to the coffee shop. Told myself I needed distance. Told myself it was healthier. But every place I went seemed to echo her, the seat she'd once taken, the faint trace of her perfume in the elevator, even the way the light hit my desk in the late afternoon. One evening I wrote her a message. "You don't have to explain. I just miss the way you used to look at me." I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over send. Then I deleted it. Later, I passed her office. The door was closed, lights off. A coat hung over her chair. For a second, I thought about knocking, just once, just to hear her voice again. But I didn't. I stood there in the half-dark hallway, listening to the hum of the air vents and the quiet ache of something unfinished. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence that I saw her again on a Sunday. Not at work, at the small grocery near my apartment. She was in the tea aisle, studying 2 boxes like the world depended on which one she chose. Her hair was loose, her coat open, no makeup. Just her. For a second, I almost turned around. It had been weeks of pretending the air didn't change when she was near. But she looked up. And when she saw me, the smallest, saddest smile touched her face. "Hi," I said. "Hi," she echoed. We both laughed quietly, like people caught breaking a rule they'd already broken too many times before. She glanced at my basket. "Dinner for one?" "Yeah." "You?" "Same." She lifted a small carton of soup. "Too tired to cook?" There was a pause, the comfortable kind, the one we used to share before everything got complicated. Then, almost without thinking, I said, "You want company?" She hesitated. The moment stretched thin. Then she nodded. "Just dinner," she said softly. "Just dinner," I promised. Her apartment was smaller than I imagined. Warm light, quiet music, a mess of books on the counter. It felt lived in, but not shared. She poured tea while I reheated the soup. We didn't talk much, every sound seemed louder than it should have been. When we finally sat at the small kitchen table, it felt like something in the world had stilled. "I didn't think you'd come," I said. "I almost didn't." She wrapped her hands around the mug. "It's easier when we don't talk." "Yeah." I smiled faintly. "But it never feels better." She looked at me then, tired eyes, honest eyes. "You make things harder, Noah." "I know. I keep trying to forget you." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "But you show up in the quiet. In the stupidest places. Like tea aisles?" That made her laugh. The sound was small, but real. The laughter faded. She looked down at her mug. I wasn't married when you met me, she said suddenly. Divorced for years. My son's the only part of that life that still matters. I didn't know, I said. You weren't supposed to. We sat there in the kind of silence that carries weight, not heavy, but full. I keep wondering, I said, if this would have been easier if we'd met somewhere else. Another time. Maybe, she said. But then you wouldn't be you. I watched her then, the way she wouldn't meet my eyes, the tremor in her hands, the wall she was too tired to keep holding up. So I reached out, slowly, and covered her hand with mine. She didn't pull away. For a long moment neither of us spoke. The city hummed faintly outside. The kettle clicked off. This is the part where we decide, she murmured. Decide what? Whether we make this real, or let it stay safe. Her thumb brushed against mine, barely there, a soft, trembling motion that said more than any words could. I wanted to tell her everything, that I didn't care about the rules, the age, the risk. But what came out instead was quiet, almost fragile. Okay. She smiled then, small, tired, but genuine. Okay, she whispered back. And that was enough. It's strange, how peace doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in small, unremarkable ways, a slower heartbeat, a familiar silence that doesn't ache anymore. Months passed after that night in her kitchen. We went back to work, back to coffee shops and emails and meetings that pretended to be about numbers but weren't. No one asked questions. Maybe no one needed to. We didn't make promises. We just showed up. Every morning at 8:47, she'd pass my desk on her way upstairs, coffee in hand, hair slightly undone from the wind. Sometimes she'd glance over her shoulder, just once, and that was enough. Other days we met at the same bench after work, the one under the flickering lamp. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we just sat. There wasn't much to say anymore, not because there was nothing between us, but because there finally was enough. One evening she handed me a small thermos. Tea, she said. Not coffee. I smiled. You're converting me? She shook her head. No. Just sharing what's warm. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was the kind that stays. Her son came to visit that spring. I met him briefly, outside the building. He was polite, curious, taller than I expected. She watched us talk from a distance, a faint, unreadable smile on her face. Later that night I told her, "You don't have to explain anything." She looked relieved. I know. But I wanted you to see the part of my life that doesn't scare me anymore. That was the moment I realized we hadn't fallen into something reckless. We'd built something quiet, brick by careful brick. One rainy afternoon, nearly a year since it began, we ended up back at the same coffee shop. The barista still remembered her order. Black coffee. 1 sugar. She ordered for both of us this time. Consistency, she said, smiling at the memory. Underrated, I replied. We sat by the same window as before, the world outside washed in motion. Her hand rested near mine on the table, not hidden, not hesitant. I used to think love had to be loud, I said, like it needed to announce itself. And now? Now I think it just needs to stay. She nodded slowly, eyes warm. Then let's let it stay. For a while, we just watched the rain. The same kind that once made her flinch, now just background to everything we'd survived. When we left, I walked her to her car. She turned, brushed her fingers against my sleeve, a gesture that had once been forbidden, now familiar. 8:47 tomorrow? She asked. Wouldn't miss it. I still don't know when, just business, became something else. Maybe it was that first pause before she said her name to the barista. Maybe it was every silence we didn't run from. Whatever it was, it stayed. Quiet. Earned. Real. And if you asked me what love feels like now, I'd say it tastes like jasmine tea cooling between us, and sounds like the faint echo of her saying, "Okay."